Okay, sure. So hello everyone.
This call is now being recorded.
Hey everyone, I'm Pankaj Rai. For today's session, what I want is that if you guys have Android Studio in your system, then that will be great, because along with presentation, I'm also going to tell you about how you can get started with it. So if you have Android Studio, then it will be so helpful for you, because you can do all this coding alongside me. But if you do not have it, then again, no issues for that, because you can have a look and then later on you can try it out, because all these things are already available with the code lab. So initially I'll start with the slides and then later on we'll go for the hands-on. Meanwhile, this is the link for the code lab, where in today's session, I'm going to talk about the remaining three. So yesterday I've talked about the introduction to Kotlin. Today we'll cover about create your first Android app, building the basic layout, and add a button. Okay, so let me start with my slides. Let me share my screen. Do audio is not clear? Okay. Fine. So let me start with the part 2 of our Android study jam. So yesterday it was all about Kotlin, and today it's all about Android. The reason why we covered Kotlin before was because we are going to use Kotlin for creating our Android application. Well, the reason why do we have choose Kotlin is again because Google made it the first class language for Android app development. But again, same thing. If you already experienced with Java, then it's not like to get started with Android, you have to learn Kotlin first, then only you can do this app. It's really not like that. But it is really simple and straightforward that if you are new to app development and you want to get started with this, then it is really recommended to learn Kotlin language and then proceed with your app development. You have so many online courses which are completely free, and you can even do a certification course on Android app development. So in this session, I'll tell about how we can develop Android application. What are views, layouts, and hands-on. So how many of you are interested to make Android application? So not just like coming to the session, heard about this, and then you're going to leave it. How many of you are going to create some application? I see many guys are raising hands. Just 3. Already have few ideas in mind. I'm interested, want to create. Okay, great. So look like many of you are interested to create Android application also. And how many of you are interested in machine learning? Again, I see so many guys. So before I start about this session, how to develop Android application, one question which I want to ask here is that, say you have some thought in your mind which is related to machine learning, the way you use machine learning, like for face detection, face recognition, or OCR, or any sort of things which is related to machine learning. How can you take to the audience? How you take to the end users? So your thought is clear. It's something which is very well known that you want to do certain things using machine learning. But how can you take to the end user? How user is going to use your product? For simplicity, let me talk about the face recognition. Say that you want to build a face recognition system, and you want your face recognition system to reach to the end user so that they can use it for security or any sort of reason. Like I'm sure you might have seen about those kind of application where you can set password for the folders, where you need to give password to the folder to open it. How about if you want to transform that kind of experience and want to bring face recognition system to that? How do you take to the end user? Well, if you know about Android app development, then you can take your machine learning stuff, whatever you want to take the end user using your mobile application. Because app development is not just having like e-commerce kind of application or a simple calculation kind of application. It could be as complex as having machine learning within that. Google Translate app. I'm really sure many of you have heard about the Google Translate app. So Google Translate app uses machine learning. You write some sentence or it recognizes from the camera itself. They use machine learning to translate the text. Same way, if you want to have something which is in machine learning and you want to take the end user, then again, Android is going to give you a great platform as it is having a reach to over 85% of the market share. Okay, now let's start about how do we can develop Android application. The first thing first here is that you need to have Android Studio. If you have Android Studio, then it's really going to be very easy because this studio is going to work even though you do not have internet connectivity. So you will not be dependent on your broadband connection and other things. Once you have your dependency set up and you can have an offline cache set up, then it's going to work offline also. But you need to have a good configuration system also for Android Studio, because if you do not have a good configuration system, then it's going to hang a lot. So if you have a system with around 8 GB RAM and i3, i5, anything is sufficient, then it's okay. Just a minute, let me switch to different voice mode then. Okay, so how about now? Do voice is clear now? Okay, great. Okay, so I was talking about Android Studio. If you have Android Studio, then it's really good to get started with it because this is the basic necessity for making Android application. The next thing is that you need to have a knowledge on any of the language, either Java or Kotlin, because these are the two most widely used mobile. These are the two most widely used languages to create mobile application. And apart from this language, you should also know a bit of OOPS concept. If you know about the class inheritance, then mostly it's going to be sufficient. Then a bit of factory pattern that you can learn along while making an Android application, but having a knowledge of class and inheritance should be sufficient to get started. Finally, we'll talk about the layout designing also. So how do Android developers create the layout? Finally, we'll see where we can run this application while testing this, because it's really not feasible solution where you extract the APK, install APK in your system to test, because it takes lots of iteration before you release the APK. So we are going to see all of them. Let me start with Vue first. So what is Vue? Anything which you see on the screen when you open mobile application, even YouTube, you have a YouTube mobile application, Google Meet application. So the text, camera view, or anything which is having user interaction, or anything which is giving some content to the user, like either audio, text, multimedia, they are all views. For example, you could have a text view for writing just text. You can have any sort of images in your application. They're called as image views. And to click on any of the button, you just have a button there. These three are widely used components. In most of the application, you'll see that you will often use text views, image views, and buttons. But views on its own cannot inflate itself. You need to align them properly. So how about organizing views on the screen? So for that, we have something called as layouts. So views are very straightforward. Views gives you an ability to display something to the user, but it doesn't understand about the placement on the screen. So if you want to place a view, say you have 3 text views and a 1 button, it is as simple as what you're seeing in the first uh, mobile application means seen here, where we have just 3 views. If you want to align in this way, then because view do not have this property on its own to align itself in a linear or horizontal fashion, then it depends on something else. That is something called as view group. Using view group, we align those views. Your views could be as simple as having 3 views in a row, or it could be as complex as views like in rows and then columns. You could have one over another one, partially visible, all sort of complexity you could have it using your view group. So I guess view group and views, these two should be clear by now, or do anyone is having doubt on what is view and what is view group? So any question on view and view group, or is it all clear? Okay. So now let me talk about various kind of view group. So say that you have a very simple screen to design, which is either horizontal or vertical. So here we could see that I'm just having my 5 views where they are just aligned one below other. And at the bottom it's side by side. For this kind of simple layout, even linear layout is sufficient. We do not need to have a very complex view group kind of system here. If your views are very simple, straightforward, linear layout is good to go. If your views are in such a fashion where you have to align one over other, like means you are doing a stack of views where one is at the background, on top of it you have another view, on top of it you have another one. That means they are just forming a stack. Then frame layout is good to go. And it's not like they are designed in this fashion to use, but they also comes with some sort of optimization. Like for example, when I talk about linear layout, then if you have a very simple kind of design where all is horizontal or vertical, then it just requires one single pass where it will not just calculate the view width and height, but also it calculates about the position of the views. That means in a single pass, it will draw on the screen. Frame layout is again exactly the same thing. It knows that it cannot be aligned to other views based on another view. It could be aligned based on stack only. So just in a single pass, that means on a single execution, it's going to calculate the view width and height and also where it should get placed on the screen. So by this way, we get an optimization also when we use linear or frame layout. However, there is one limitation with linear layout. If you do not add weights to that, then only this works well in a single fashion. What is weight? That I'll tell when I'll show the hands-on. When you have weights for this linear layout, that means you tell about the views that how much screen width or height it should accommodate. Then it need to have 2 passes. The first pass is to know about the view width and height, and the second pass is to know about where to place it and how much width or height it's going to occupy on the screen. But if it's straightforward with no weights, this is really good to go. Now let me talk about one of the widely used view group, which is constraint layout. Constraint layout is a replacement of relative layout.
So if anyone have started Android app development around 2 or 3 years back, then that person might have used relative layout for achieving the complex design. Complex design like where one view is aligned based on another view. Earlier in linear layout and frame layout, it was aligned directly based on the screen. So with constraint layout, you can do it based on views. For example, this top part where I have this orange color background, then image, and then button, we have seen this with frame layout. Now, exact same thing can be achieved with constraint layout also. Well, these three views are not directly aligned to each other. But with constraint layout, we can certainly put those kind of alignment. But really, again, constraint layout is really not good for this kind of places where we are doing a stack of views. But where it is really helpful is for these buttons. Think of this that I have two buttons here, one at left side, one at other side, below this yellow box. Now this view at left side and the view at right side, they are aligned based on the box. So they are not at the corner of the screen, rather they are aligned with the box. And just below this, I want another button. So wherever you have a complex view where view is depending on another view, constraint layout is really a good layout to go ahead with. So these are the three widely used view groups: linear layout, frame layout, and constraint layout. Apart from this, we also have more, but in most of the application, you'll see these three view groups. So do anyone is having question about these three view groups, when to use frame layout, constraint layout, and linear layout? Well, layout and view group, they are not different. With layout, what I mean is that the way you are going to place it. So view group is something which is going to align your views. We do not have anything called as layout. We use layout when we need to add data binding to Android application, but there's nothing called as layout view group. So in the diagram, what you have seen layout, in technical word, this is something similar to view group. Views are individual elements and view group align those views. Okay, so any question on linear layout, constraint layout, or frame layout? Oh, okay, so now let me move on to user interface. So till now you have seen about the individual components. The views are the part of the screen through that you are going to show something to the user. View group is something through that you are going to align your views. Now about the user interface. When you have a combination of both of them, view group, and inside view group, you have all your views. This is how it's going to look like. At the left side, you could see we have one kind of screen. On the other side, it's another kind of screen where we just have image views. So based on your app requirement, you could have text views, images, buttons, card, radio buttons, lots of things on your UI. So we do not have any sort of limitation like you can only have text view at the center of the screen or top of the screen, or you could just have text view or a button in a single screen. There is no such limitation. You can have any number of views. But for better readability, usability, and for better performance, it is advised to keep as less view as possible, not to overwhelm your user by showing lots of views in a single screen. And that's the reason that we have something called as scrolling view. So we have something called as scroll views, recycler view, through that user could scroll through the page to see the content. It, like in the YouTube application itself, on a single screen, they do not show all the videos. You just scroll down and you see the videos. So by this way, you show limited content to the user present on the visible part of the screen. And we'll see how we can create user interface. So in today's hands-on, we'll see how to create views, how we can align them in view groups, and finally we'll create a user interface also by aligning all of them and creating application. But before I switch for hands-on, let me talk about material design also. So how many of you are interested in designing, like website design or even drawing? Any interest in creating some sort of designs, drawings? Then those who are interested in drawings, then it's very simple case, like if you have given something to draw, a scenery, then you will draw much better than those who do not have experience in making your, say, any kind of sceneries or designs. It's very straightforward. So same fashion we have here also. Material design is one of the widely used design guidelines for making Android application. It's really not possible for Android developer to know about what could be the guidelines for a wide variety of the users. So material design is a design language provided by Google, which says about when to use what views, when you should use button, how much width or height it should be, also how to align it, where the shadow should be. When you click on a button, how it should have a ripple effect. But they are saying it well and good. But how difficult it will be for Android developer to do all those things. Like when you click on a button, again, show a ripple effect, where it should have shadow, what should be the color of it. It will be very complex for the Android developers to do all those things. So that's why Google has also built the material design library for this, where you will not have to create all those things. You get the material design components directly from the library. You just use it and it automatically follows the material design guidelines. For width and height, that's something which you have to follow, and the placement of the screen. But ripple effect, that is something which you'll automatically get. And not just ripple effect, even for creating, say, different shapes, then we have shape drawables. For Fab, we also have the width and height predefined for this. So all sort of things you can have it with material design. So if you check out the material design website, you will see a lot about designing your Android application. Now let me talk about the activity. So I have shown about the user interface in the previous slide. We have shown two apps where one was having textual content and the one was having more sort of images. So how do this user interface gets created? Views I've talked about. This something which you are going to show to the user. View group is used to align those views. How do you create user interface? Where you are going to inflate those view and view groups. So for that, we have activity. Activity is the entry point for your Android application. You could have activity or fragment. In this session, I'm not covering fragment because fragment will be an advanced concept. For now, activity is really sufficient to get started, where activity have its own life cycle. And this is something through which you provide entry to your Android application. That means when user taps on the app icon, you open the activity. And for this, there's something called as manifest, where you define your activity. Classes and object. So that is really important because everything, whatever you're going to see in the upcoming hands-on session, which will be just after this slides, you'll see that I'll start with the class. Activity is also nothing but a class. Then this class is going to give some overridden method to us. Based on the required overridden method, we are going to inflate something to the UI. That's something nothing but the user interface. How to do all those things, we'll see in the hands-on. One thing here is that for any class, you can create an object. But how about activities? They are also class. But for activities, you actually do not need to create object. So to start any of the activity, it's not like you create an object and then object.start or something like that. For starting an activity, it's already taken care by the framework. There are ways defined through that you need not have to create an instance of a class and open it. Rather, you just give the class name and it will automatically launch it for you. Okay, now let me move on to hands-on. I hope you all are ready with your Android Studio open with you, or you need time to open that. So shall we start with our hands-on? Okay, let me share my Android Studio now. Okay, so here is my Android Studio. Before I talk much about Android Studio, let me show what we are going to build today. So here we'll have an app, we'll have a button, and when I tap on a button, you could see the image is changing here. So we have a dice number of 3 here. On a roll, we have some other number, like 2 here or 4. We'll see how we can build this application. But before that, it's all about Android Studio. So here in the file, when you open a new project, it will have this style. Well, based on Android Studio, which you're using, you may have a bit of different look. I'm using the beta version of it, so I have a bit different look here, where I have Jetpack Compose. And in the stable version, we currently do not have this Jetpack Compose. It's a modern UI toolkit to create Android application. So using Jetpack Compose, you create your layouts, your all UI design all through the Kotlin code, no XML. But for now, we are not talking about Jetpack Compose. So when you create a new project, you'll see this style, and in all those Android Studio, you'll see something called as empty activity. You can select that and click on next. Then specify the name of the project. This name is something which you want to keep it, like you can have dice roller. And then it will ask for the package name. So how many of you have seen the package name in Play Store? So when you open Play Store on your laptop, you'll see the package name on the top. So package name is really helpful to distinguish your app from any other application. And this has to be unique. So based on your necessity, you can have something like com dot your company name, and then the way you say about your app, either it's app name or nickname, code name, any sort of things. So the normal naming convention which is followed here is like com dot organization name dot your app name or the nickname or the code name of your application. Finally, where you want to save this project, then the language. The by default one is either Java or Kotlin. So select Kotlin and then specify the minimum SDK version. Well, we do have other minimum SDK version also, like KitKat, Jellybean, and all those things. But most of the Android users, you'll find it from Android Lollipop and onwards. If your user base is something where you want to target about Android 6, then you can select that also. And here it shows that approximately worldwide it covers how many devices. So with Marshmallow, it's going to cover around 84.9% of the devices. With Lollipop, it's going to cover 94% of the devices. But what happens if you try to install? So say I want to have Android Pie as my minimum SDK version, which is just having 39.5% of the device worldwide. How about if I set this as a minimum SDK version? The major issue here is that anyone who is having Android device which is not running Android Pie in that, they'll not able to install it. Minimum SDK version is to what extent you are giving support for your APK to get installed on the Android device. So from that to above all those version, whichever is available, it will work on those devices. So if you say Pi here, it will work from Android Pie and onwards, but not for below Pi version. Same way, if you select Lollipop, then your app will work on any device which is running Android Lollipop and above Lollipop, but it will not work on below version like KitKat, Ice Cream, all those versions. Finally, you just have to click on Finish and it will set up the project for you, an empty project. So the moment you have your project set up, you'll see something like this. So on the top, you have app and the Gradle script. So all the dependencies which you're going to have it for your application development that you specify in this build.gradle. This is the place where you specify the compile SDK version, which means your target version. And this generally has to be the latest one, but you can either have the latest or one below the latest. The recommended one is to have the latest one. Here you also have the application ID. So later on, if you want to add authentication to your Android application, like for Facebook authentication, Google authentication, then that's going to ask for this application ID. And this will be the same as what you have given while you're creating this project, the package ID. But this is something which you can change it on at any point of time. But remember, if you change this and if you have configured any of the social login setup, then that will also break. So if you're changing this, then again, you have to change your social login setup once again. Also, we have the minimum SDK version where you can specify API level 21 is for Lollipop. So if you change anything here, you have to click on sync now so that it will sync the project based on your changes. Then the target SDK version says that what version of SDK you're targeting. This should generally be the max version, which is the current ongoing version of Android Studio. By this, you give an indication to the system that you have tested your application to this level of Android Studio and it's really working well. But it really doesn't mean that it's not going to work on the above version also. So for example, I could give here 21 itself, the target SDK version. It really doesn't mean that it's not going to work on any version above 21. Then version code and version name is something which you could see in Play Store. So version code is helpful when you try to publish this application on Play Store. Version name is something which you see there. It's a string, so it's not like 1.0. You can have any sort of stuff here, like 1.0.0, 1.0.1, 1.0.10. The recommended approach here is that if you have a major change the first digit of it. If it is a minor change, then the second. And if just a small patch, then change the third one. Generally, it's recommended to have three notions here, one for major, then for minor, and then for just patchwork changes. Finally, here you also specify about the authentication. So in the release build or in the debug build, do you need authentication? Which means that say you build your Android application, you have put on all your effort. Now you really do not want anyone else to take your app, do reverse engineering, get your code, and then do his development from there on. Sophistication is a mechanism through that whatever you have written, like this main activity, whatever content which you are seeing, it will obfuscate that. That means it will give a random name and numbers to this, so that even if anyone do reverse engineering to this, it will not be easily visible to them that what you have written properly. So all these names, they'll be written like AB, ABC, something like that. Generally, that code is not for the developers. That kind of code is written so as to avoid misusage of your code. So it's really recommended that whenever you try to upload your app to the Play Store, have release, enable minify enable to true, and have a ProGuard file. Minify enable, what do this one do is that all your unused dependencies, libraries, it's going to delete all of them while generating the APK. So by this way, it reduces the size of your APK also. Finally, in this dependency section, we see all these implementations. Well, this project is directly taken from the code lab. And if you download this, then you'll also see the exact same thing. This is the dice roller app, which is given in the code lab itself. But for now, I do not want to give link to this because this is something which will end up when you do the initial code labs first. Here you provide all sort of dependencies. The first one is about the app compact. This is something which is very common, and this you have to provide so that you could use the basic component of your application for all activities, fragments, navigations, all sort of things you get with this app component. KTX is something which you can or you could avoid using it. It's you could say it provides a convenient method to create shared preferences and other sort of things. Constraint layout, if you remember about the view group, then I was talking about the constraint layout. Linear layout, frame layout, all those things will directly come if you have this app compact. No need to explicitly have the dependency for that. But for constraint layout, you need to manually add the dependency. If you do not add this, then you cannot use constraint layout while creating your layouts. Okay, so this was all about the Gradle, which is using the Groovy language. This is not Kotlin, this is not Java, this is Groovy language. In another Gradle, you see about the repositories from where it should fetch the dependencies. Sometime you'll also have the Maven Center. The default written centers here is the Google and J Center. Okay, now let me switch to activity. But do anyone is having any questions so far? Let me see the chat. Okay, so any questions so far for setting up the project? Next, I'll talk about how you can set up the emulator so that you could see the application which you are creating. Okay, nothing as such. Then let me move on to creating emulator. Now, before you write your application, the first and the important thing here is about the emulator or the original device. You could have your Android phone, enable the USB debugging and connect your device, or create Android emulator. Because at the end, you want to see while making Android applications that how well your UI is looking, how well the functionalities are working. It's not like you just do all sort of coding and then finally run to check. It's a side-by-side process where as you code, you do test your application also. For that, we depends on either Android emulator or on the real Android device. Well, the recommended one is really to have the Android physical device over emulator. But if you do not have the physical device, then you can certainly run on emulator also. So for emulator, just beside this SDK manager, you'll have this section AVD manager. Just click on this and it will open a dialog. I already have one emulator, so it is showing me here. For you, it will take you to this screen when you click on create virtual emulator. Because you need for phone, so select phone and which device emulator do you want. You can also have emulator for TV, Wear OS, tablet, and automotive. But if you are making phone application, then do have it for phone. Select any of the device and click on next. Then it will ask for the operating system. Which operating system do you want? Android R, Q, previous version of it. Select the operating system which you want. But before selecting, it will give you an option to download it. So just click on download, select that OS, and then again click on next. Finally, name of your AVD. You can specify any name or leave the default one. Finally, when you click on finish, it will set up the AVD, the Android virtual device for you. So as I already have it, so I'm clicking on cancel. I have my AVD with me. Now, when you click on run button, which is here at the top, you'll see your Android emulator getting started. Or other approach is like, again, go back to AVD and click on this button. This little icon will run your app once again. No, this little icon will start your emulator, and then to run your application, click on the run button here. Okay, so this was all about setting up Android Studio and emulator. Now I'll talk about making Android app. So any questions so far for setting up how to get emulator? Okay, let me repeat this. So you have AVD manager here on the top. So just hover the icon on top of it and you will see something called as AVD manager. When you click on AVD manager, you will see a window. If you have something like this, then click on create virtual device. But if you do not have any virtual device, then you'll not see this screen. Rather, you'll directly see this screen. Here you have an option to create Android virtual device, and it gives you the category that you want it for TV, phone, Wear OS, tablet, automotive. Because if you want to develop for phone, so select phone, and then which phone model do you want? You want Pixel XL, Pixel 4, Pixel 4, or 3A, 3XL. So these are Android devices. Whatever you select, it creates the replica of that device. So it shows you the virtual device for that particular model. If I select Pixel 4, then it's going to create a virtual replica of Pixel 4 for me. If I select Pixel XL, then it will have a virtual Pixel 4 XL device. So it just have that kind of UI there, the phone design based on whatever you select here. And this is all about the layout only, not about the operating system. So if you want your phone to look like Pixel 4 XL, then select Pixel 4 XL. And then here you have to select the operating system which your Android virtual device, that means emulator, should run. You could select the latest version or the lollipop version, whichever you want. But before selecting this, you need to download it also. So when you click on download, it will start downloading it. Once the download is done, it will give you an option to select it and then click on next. Finally, if you want to change the name of your AVD, you can do that. If you do not want to change anything, then you can leave it and click on finish. Okay, so any question on this? Where did you click to get virtual device? Okay, so do one thing. If you are using Windows machine, then click on Control Shift A. When you click Control Shift A, you see something like this. Search bar will come here at the top or bottom or center. Somewhere you'll see this search bar. When you click Control Shift A altogether, In this search bar, just type AVD. When you search for AVD, you get AVD Manager. Just click on it. So it's all about Control Shift A and search bar, type AVD. Is it clear, or do anyone having questions or doubt on Android Studio or Emulator? Because without these two, it's not going to work for app development. Clear for all? I saw one message. Clear for one person. Okay, so let me proceed to the next part now. Creating layouts. So let me hide my emulator and let me talk about this package system also. So I've talked about the Gradle script. Now let me talk about the app. So here in this app, you have manifest. This manifest says a lot about your application. This says about what kind of dependency this app is going to have. What kind of permission do this app is going to have. Dependency you specify in Gradle, and all permissions which you need, you specify in the manifest. So you can say something like use permission and give like camera. When you do that, it gives an indication to the system that this app requires camera permission. If you are having Android Marshmallow below devices, because from Marshmallow, camera is added as a dangerous permission, which has to be asked during runtime. But for below Marshmallow version, when user try to install their application, then system will ask for the camera permission automatically. So this is the place you define the permission. Then inside application, you define all your activities. You specify the name of them, and one should have the intent filter. For whichever activity you have this intent filter with action main and launcher, that will be the activity which will get launched when you click on the icon of your app. So once you install the app, as I've specified main activity with an intent filter as main and launcher, so it's going to open main activity for me. And I can have any number of activities here based on the activities which I have. So if I have, say, some other activity here, instead of main activity, say I have second activity, then I can have a name defined for that also. If I do not specify the name of activity here and I try to launch that, then app will crash. So it's important to register all the activity in this manifest. Also, you specify all your services, the metadata, everything you specify in this manifest. So this is really important file for your app. Next is about Java. So inside this Java, you see your package name, which you have given while creating this project, com.example.dice roller, and inside this you'll have the activity file. We also have Java generated, which you can just ignore it. It's not for you. This Java folder is for you. Then inside resources, we have drawable. So drawable is a place where you keep all your images or the XMLs, the vector drawables or the XML which you are creating. For example, you can right click on this drawable, go to new, and you have vector assets. You get the predefined assets, which is coming through this Android Studio itself. So if you have any of this kind of requirement, then you can directly select that, click on OK, and then just, if you want to change color, do the color change here. And then finally, you can click on next. it gives you the message that it's going to have it inside drawable, and that's the name which you have given. And this gets added here. Not just this, you can also have PNGs, JPEG, or WebP format images all inside this drawable. So drawable is all about having those files which you can show on the screen, either image file, vector file, the .xml, or any sort of shape which you want to create, or the gradients. All those things you specify inside this drawable. Layout is the place where you create your layout design. So the language used here is XML. This is the place where you have your view group, and inside view group, you keep your views. And I'll come to this later on because we need to see how to create view group and then the views. Mipmap. So this is the place where you keep your app icon. One of the easiest way to change this one is just click on Mipmap, right click, and then select image assets. Then foreground layer, give the foreground layer, which could either be image, clip art, or text. Anything is okay here. Then the background layer, so as to make it an adaptive icon, where the foreground layer is different than the background layer. You can either have image, or you could have a color. For foreground also, you can change the color. You could also play with the size of it. And finally, once all is done, just click on next and finish. So that will replace the app icon automatically. And whatever you have created, that will be the new app icon. Also, values is a place where you keep all your colors, which you're going to use it in your application. You can also hard code it, but hard coding is really not a recommended approach. Because if you keep all your colors at single place, then it is easy to maintain. And the best part here is that if you want to give the night and the day support for your application, then it really becomes very easy when you have at a single place. Launcher background, this came here. String. So string is the place where whatever string which you are going to show on the screen, either it's as simple as submit, okay, or any sort of string which you want to show on the screen, this should be there in this string.xml. It's really not a hard-coded way of saying like you have to do it only in the string, but this is a recommended approach because if you want to add localization, because India is one such country where we have lots of languages. So if you want to develop application which you want to cover with different languages which are spoken in India itself, then you can do all those things by having different strings.xml file. So your key remains same. This is the app, means if you see about the hash map, then you give your key and the value. So this is nothing but the key, and that's the value. By default, this is for English. And now if you want to give for any other language, your key, this will remain same, but this value will change based on the language which you want to cover on. By this way, you give localization support. And that's why it is always recommended to keep all your strings at this place, and later on, either in XML or in code, you can fetch this string later on. I'll show how to fetch string from this string.xml also. Styles.xml. So this is the place where you have to provide your app theme. Like here I've specified it's light, dark action bar. I can also have no action bar. Then I'll not see my app title coming in the action bar. That's the default one where it automatically show my app name also in the action bar. Also, I can have a daylight theme which will support the day and light theme based on you use a toggle or based on your logic, whatever you are specifying. This is also used for avoiding duplication. For example, say you have a view which is having a property of text size of 30 and then color as black, width as match, height as say 48 dp. Then instead of writing this over and over, you can have it in the style and then just set style for the text view. So any questions so far for this layout system, drawable layout, mipmap, values? Because now we'll start making Android application. Why we need manifest file? So manifest file is really important for all the Android application. You can think manifest file is like a signature of your application, which says a lot about what your application is going to consume, which services it's going to run, which activities it is having, and what service it is asking to run in the background. Or if you think about the contact application, then other application read from that contacts. So you can specify whether other application can read from your application or also or not by giving this exported flag to either true or false. So this is really important for all the Android application. You'll not see any app which is not having Android manifest file because Play Store uses this file to figure it out the permission which you are asking for. If you go on Play Store and see any of the application, then before installing, you can check out what sort of permission do this app is going to ask for. Manifest file is again where Play Store depends on. It read through this manifest file and give this information that this app is going to ask for this set of permissions. So manifest is really important. Any other questions? Okay, no question. Then let me move on to creating applications. So let me first jump to layout. So to create your app layout, what you can do is that we have something called as design. So here in the palette, you see the commonly used views, then like the text, buttons, widgets, layouts. Here you'll see this linear layout, constraint layout, frame layout, table rows, normal space, and then containers like spinner, recycler view. What you can do is that based on your requirement, that what do you want, either text views or image, you can just take that and drag and drop. This is one way to create your layout where you can drag and drop, place it based on your need at the center of the screen, below one other views, or click on code, then go on to your views and specify the constraints. So here, instead of constraint layout, we could also use linear layout. Or even we could use frame layout. Because if you see our design, then we wanted this to the center of the screen. So this is something which could achieve with constraint layout or linear layout, both. But the reason why I'm showing with constraint layout here is that to see about the dependency. So if you see, then I have button, which is below this image view. So how could I do this? I have a button, which is a view. I have a width and height as wrap and wrap, which means that whatever is the content which I have here, based on that, occupy your width and height accordingly. So for example, say if I have a very long string here, you'll see that width is getting adjusted automatically. That's all because width is specified as wrap content. And same is true for height also, where now you could see I made a new line. So height is also getting adjusted. So wrap and wrap is something which you can think as if adjust based on the text given. It will automatically adjust the width or height if you specify wrap and wrap for both of them. Also, I've told about that you have to write all your strings in string.xml. So how you could fetch from there? For that, you just have to write @string and then the key of it. Here you could see key is role and the value is this. So on the screen, you'll see the value, which is role, and here is the key. So this was all about creating a button, but I'm not aligning it for now. Think as if I'm not doing that. Let me remove this. So I have my image. I have my button. These are my individual views. I have two views inside this view group constraint layout. I want this image to be at the center of the screen. So for that, what I should do is that I should specify the constraint, because constraint layout, as the name indicated, depends on the constraint. So top to the top of parent, this will attach this image view top with the top of the screen, because I set top to the top of parent. Now, if I want to attach this bottom of this image view to the bottom of the screen, then I should do bottom to the bottom of parent. By this way, it came here. Why do it came here? Because you can think as if it is trying to push itself from the top side and then bottom side. Whatever is the center point, it brought that to that place. Also, start to the start of parent for the left side and for the right side, and to the end of parent. And here it came to the center of the screen. So this is an image view, but where is my image? I have my constraint, which is well and good. I brought it to the center by specifying top to the top of parent, bottom to the bottom of parent, so that both are stretching itself, and brought this image to the center. And then to the center of the screen, for that again, start to the start of parent and to the end of parent. And now I have to specify the source. Source is something I could say dice1. And here I have my image view. So based on the constraint which I have explained, who could tell me about what should be the constraint for this button to bring it below this image view, and again from left and right to the center of the screen? So what could be the constraint for this button? Anyone want to say about this? Okay. So for button, earlier for this image view, I have used top to the top of parent because I want to align this to the top of the screen. Now for this button, I want it below this image view. So what should I do is that I should say top to the bottom of ID of this image view. So it's designed in such a way that the way you do it's designed in such a way as you are speaking in an English term, top to the bottom of this image view, and here it is. Now to bring it to the center, again do the same thing, start to the start of parent and to the end of parent. Parent is nothing but the screen, and whatever view ID which you specify, with that it's aligning to that view. What is this @ID? So all the views which you want to reference through your activity file, either written in Kotlin or Java, you have to reference it with the ID because you are going to create an object of this image view. So how do you reference it? For that, you have to have an ID for it. And this ID has to be unique throughout this activity main.xml. In another XML, I can again have this same ID. But now in this activity main, I cannot have same ID. That means that I cannot have this button once again with same ID. It's not permitted. I can have different ID for this. This is okay, well and good. But no same ID in the same layout file. Okay, now let me switch to main activity, the coding part. So here it is extending the app compact activity so that it could support the material design. And inside this, we have one overridden method called as onCreate, which takes saved instance state. And this is nothing but type of bundle so that if you do a screen orientation change, then you could store those information in the saved bundle state and fetch from there. Well, most of the time, you'll not find a need for this. So you can ignore this for now. You have onCreate method, and inside this is the most important method, set content view. Using set content view, whatever layout which you have created here, this layout, you are going to show it on the screen. So if you forget to write this piece of code, then you'll not see anything on the screen. Rather, your app will start crashing because it will not find the views also. So this is the most important part for your activity file, set content view. Now I have my button here. I have my image view. How do I can control this button from my file or change the image view images because I don't want to show one all the time. Based on button click, I want to change the image. For that, I need to have an object for it. And that you do by creating an object of button or image view, whatever you're using there. So role button, no need to create new button here. You are just referencing it. For that, you have to use find view by ID. Then specify the ID. Now what happens if I say image view here? I have a reference of button and then I'm saying that it is of type image view. So you directly see the error here that this button is of type button and I'm trying to give the type as image view. Let me change back to button. So got it. This is very clear approach. The another approach which you'll see in most of the Android application is that you'll see this as a global object. But if you remember, then I've talked about this, that in Kotlin, all global should have the default value. So private val say role button, button. I cannot leave it like this. I have to give the default value. So if I give default value as null, then it's okay. But the major concern there is that whenever I need to access any of the property of this, like set on click listener or set text, then all the time I have to call like question mark dot. Set text. I have to do this because I made this of nullable type. So I cannot directly call like dot set text. So all views object which you are going to have it in your main activity. For that, what you could do is that you can specify this like private late init var. When you do that, you can avoid giving the default value. What this late init means is that for now, you're not giving any default value, but later on, you will provide value for this. So before initialization of this, if you try to use, like, I haven't initialized this, I'm directly trying to use with the role button set text, then it will throw an error that this is not initialized and I'm trying to access the value or set any sort of values. So for that, let's initialize this. I'm role button dot find view by ID dot ID dot button. So this is a common approach we'll see in most of the application. You have your view object with private late init var so that you could avoid giving the default value, and then inside on create, initialize it with find view by ID. And then you can use it based on your wish without any question mark, because you have specified this that it is of non-nullable type. So anyone having any questions so far here? Why did I use late init, and why this is important? What happens if you remove late init? Bottom of parent. So what was this question? Bottom of parent, that during the layout design, what I've specified, bottom of parent, this. So here I've specified bottom to the bottom of parent, which means that for this view, have a constraint for top, left, right, and bottom, where this top is constraint, means aligned to the top of the screen. Bottom aligned with the bottom of the screen. Because the width and height are specified here. So what it try to do is that it will try to bring this view to the center of the screen. So you'll see this at the left side, but not exactly to the center of the screen. So to again bring it to the center, specify start to the start of parent, end to the end of parent. For button, because I want this button below this image view, so top to the bottom of this image view. Then start to the start of parent, end to the end of parent. Any other questions? Okay, so no questions. So let me finish this off where I have my button. On this button, I'm setting the click listener. Why do we need this? Because when a user tab on a button, so as I've shown in the emulator, when I'm clicking on a button, I'm doing some sort of operation. That operation is nothing but changing this image. So how do system will understand this to intercept my click listener? For that, on a button, I'm setting set on click listener. Inside this, I'm saying what do I need to do inside this function. See this function, then it's creating a dice object. Dice is nothing but a simple class which takes number of side as a parameter, and then we have a function here which does nothing but to return a random value ranging from that one number to the max number whatever you have specified. Now if anyone of you have remember about this, how can we further optimize this? Because a single return line statement, do there is another way to write this apart from writing like fun roll colon int, then in the braces we have return one dot dot numsci dot random. Do there is another way to write this function to further reduce the length of code? Yes, so we can use the assignment operator here, and instead of using this, what I could do is like I could have equal to here. That's it. this will work well because the value which is assigned to this function role, that becomes the return type of it, which is nothing but an integer here. And this is optional. Either you write it or you leave it. So here I have dice object where I'm saying the max number of side is 6, which means that I can get any random value ranging from number 1 to 6. That random number I'm getting by calling dice.roll. Roll is nothing but a function inside this class. Then eventually I need to change the image of this image view. So I also have find view by ID. And again, as I said, for view object, what you could do is that you can avoid having a local one if you are having at multiple places, because if I'm going to use this at multiple places, then writing this line of code is really not recommended. Here I just have one function, well and good. But if I have multiple function where I need to use this image view, then this is not a recommended approach. The recommended approach is to have a global object of this and then use it in all those functions. Okay, so here I have my image view object so that I could change the image when I tap on a button. So here eventually I'm using when dice roll is going to return a number ranging from 1 to 6. And here it is saying if it is 1, then return one image, for 2, another image, and same way we go till 5 and then finally else. Now, those who have used C++ and Java, you could correlate this with switch case. It's an alternative of switch case here in Kotlin. In C++ or in Java, we have switch. Inside switch, we just give our object the thing where that we want to have an equal to comparison. Here it's again same thing, but instead of switch, we have when, and it can do much more than what switch can do. It's not just about the equality comparison here. So inside when, I have this object, and then this is doing an equality comparison for now. Dice roll in 1, which is eventually nothing but it is saying that if dice roll is equal to 1, then do this work. It eventually means that. But you need not to write this part. This is automatically doing a comparison, and if this dice roll matches with 1, it will execute this part. Matches with 2, it executes this part. Same way, if it is 6, which is it's not matching with any one of this, then it will go in else branch and it will return this. So when is also an expression, which means that it can return value. And that is why you could see that I'm trying to assign this to another object. So from here, when I'm returning these drawable are nothing but the PNG images. Finally, I'm going to set this drawable on image view. So here inside this image drawable, so set image resource, I'm setting this image drawable. Also, it is recommended to provide content description so that those people who have enabled the assistance mode, then they could see about this, that means they could hear about that what this image view is for. So if you have a readout in the accessibility mode, then whatever content which you are specifying for this image view, that assistant mode is going to read the same text to the user. So this is for the accessibility. But even if you avoid that, still it's going to work. So this is a simple way of creating and setting this image on the screen. And by the way, as I was talking about, when is having more functionality than just this. So what was that? So say that I have dice roll. And what do I want is that if this number is between 1 to 3, then I want to print some message. If it is 4, 5, then another message, and for 6, another one. Then how could I do that? With Kotlin, it's really very simple. You can specify in 1. This is something called as a range operator, double dots, 1, 2, 3, which means that if the value of dice range is in between 1 to 3, then execute this part. Also, if it is 4 or 5, then execute this part. Finally, I could say 6, or I could have else branch. It's not mandatory to have else. If you already have the value, you know that if this matches with that particular value, then only do the work. You can specify that also. So by this way, you can use when also. So it's not just about equality comparison, it do much more than that in Kotlin. And by this way, you could reduce a lot of code when you use when. So any questions for this? How do you store an image to an object? Oh, well, for image to an object, now what happens here is that we have image view, which is nothing but this view which you are seeing here in the layout file, in the layout main. Activity main.xml is having this image view. You reference that with find view by ID. Now, what happens here is that whatever drawable which you are going to specify here, it in turn is going to give you an ID for it. So this, if you see, it's of type int. So it's not image, it's not bitmap, it's just the ID of it. So eventually what do this one is going to return is this exact same ID, r.drawable.dice1. So all these things is having an ID. This ID is specified in this R file. So R is actually a very big lengthy file which keeps an ID for everything. All your images, drawables, your views, all are referenced through this R file, even your layouts. So it keeps an ID for all of them. Here with when, it's not storing any image. It is just trying to store the ID of it. And then using set image resource, you're just passing an ID. This is as equal as writing r.drawable.dice1 earlier, and this, they are completely same. Here also I'm giving ID, and there also I'm giving ID. But instead of writing set image resource individually every time, like if I do not return value, then another approach was like I have to write this individually for everyone. Then I could say like this. So instead of setting this individually for all these numbers, it's much better to store it to an object and then eventually just call this method once and set it here. So that's the reason that that kind of code was written, where from when you're just trying to return the ID of the drawable which you want to draw on the screen, and then inside this method, so we have this set image resource. To that you are just passing this drawable resource. So we have dice image, set image resource, and just pass on the drawable. That's it. Any other questions? Or do we are good to conclude this session? Okay, so before I conclude this session, the next thing is about how do you run it. So once you have your app ready, you will see a icon here, an arrow kind of icon. When you click on this icon, it will run your app on the emulator or the real device, whichever you have connected with. It will take a bit of time to build the Gradle first. Once it is built, then it will try to install your app so that you can just have a look that how well it is working. Do it requires any sort of modifications? Once you think that it is really working well, then just go on to build and generate the APK. Build bundle APK. From here, you can build the APK. That's going to be the debug version of it. And when you click on generate signed bundle or APK, here you generate the signed APKs or the app bundles. And that's something which you should always upload on Play Store. Do not upload your debug build on Play Store. Release build reduces size of your app because of the obfuscation. Also, it because of obfuscation, it adds the security, and because of minify enable, it reduces the size of your APK also. So, any questions for how to make Android application? Nothing as such. Okay, so let me move on, conclude this session. So I do have these links with me. I guess if Anthony could share the links for this, then that will be helpful for all the members.
Yeah, sir. I'll share the links with the participants.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Also, same thing. If you have learned something new, then use the hashtag Android Study Jam. Tweet it on Twitter so that let the audience know that you have studied, you have learned something in the Android Study Jam and what you have learned. If you are building something, your Android application, then again, you could do a publicity for that by just saying that what you have built, upload your code base to the GitHub if it's an open source project, if you're doing it, and then let the audience see that what you are building and working on. Finally, if you want to know about how to create it, because in this entire session, I've talked about how to do this stuff, but I cannot dive deep into this for this 1 or 1.5 hour session. So most of the content you can see in this channel, All Techies, where I have talked about various components to be used like Jetpack Compose also, Android layout systems, and even on Firebase. So you can learn about all those things by visiting this channel. Also subscribe this channel so that you'll get the notification and the videos as soon as I upload them. But by the way, before I conclude this one, how many of you are about the geeks for the backend development who like to create backend? Backend is like a server management where you get the content in the backend and then you push it to your connected application, either for the mobile or for the web. Everyone requests backend. Whoever needs internet connectivity, they need backend. So anyone of you who like backend development? So Firebase, I'm not sure how many of you have used Firebase before, but Firebase is a Google product. So using Firebase, what you could do is that they offer two services. One is real-time database and another one is the cloud file store. Using these two services, you can provide backend services to your Android, iOS, and web application. By using Cloud File Store or real-time database, it offers you the real-time database capability, which means that as soon as the content at the server side changes, it push updates immediately to all connected devices. The best part here is that you need not have to manage anything. No need to manage the security for this, the server configuration, the amount of RAM required, processing speed, and the best of all, what happens when your user grows suddenly in a day. You do not want to show that your system is running out of memory or it cannot have a capability to handle those set of users. So Firebase also offers upscaling and downscaling based on your user growth. So there are so many services which Firebase offers, and I am GD for Firebase. So if you want to know more about Firebase, then we could have session in upcoming days, or again, in all techies, I do have few other videos on Firebase also. So do check out the Firebase also. There are lots of great services through that you could create your projects either for your websites or mobile application, Android or iOS. It's helpful for all of them. So thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. I guess these 2 days would be helpful for you to know about the Kotlin and how you can get started with Android app development.
Right. So I'll guess we'll wind up the session here. So thank you, sir. I'm very sure the participants found the sessions to be very informative. It was very thorough. Thank you for taking the effort to come join us for 2 days on behalf of DSC CET and DSC UCEK. And from the participants, thank you, participants. You guys were awesome. You guys were very engaging. Thank you for having us for this session. Hope you guys have fun.